All right, welcome back to KM6LYW Radio. This is the show about amateur radio with an emphasis on digital modes, trying to reimagine them in information age. Hey, I know I did a video in the past about solar power, how to power your shack with simple battery and a simple charge controller. I've got a new solar system. I thought I'd share it with you. You know, a lot of research goes into this, not only to power your radios, but maybe some other stuff as well. And of course, we're going to do it as cheap as possible, and we're going to do it this time on KM6LYW Radio. All right, welcome back. Yeah, I'm still getting away with the bumper music. You know, at least it gives me an excuse to play the guitar here. I don't know. I'm running out of jingles, guys. You're gonna have to help me out. That was am I doing too much Led Zeppelin? I don't know. Okay, everyone else gets to do bumper music, so I get to do bumper music in my videos too, playing the guitar. All right, if you saw the last video, let me make myself a lot smaller here. I had a collection of batteries and a handful of solar panels, and this is really for portable operations. So check that if you want to look at some of these smaller batteries. We've got a lead acid, we've got a lithium iron phosphate here, we have some lithium polymers. So this is in the last video, and I think we had like a 50-watt panel in the background. Well, that's all changed now. We've got something completely different.
Boy. That escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
That's right. We went from a 16 amp hour battery, which is maybe in the $50 price range, and we went all the way into a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery that you can see there. And I even added an inverter. So my requirements changed a little bit. I didn't want to just power a ham radio. This will totally do that. Don't get me wrong. This will do 100 amps or so. But I wanted to be able to, survive brownouts, blackouts, basically run the refrigerator or maybe the heating system, the blower in the heating system. We have propane here, and maybe run fans, and maybe run all of the little objects in the shack here. I got a lot of stuff I can see if I can convert to low voltage, like where do you get a low voltage fan? Where do you get a 12 volt lamp? I want to see if stuff that I leave on all day long, like the Raspberry Pis and all that. Can I power all that stuff off of this using a single panel that's up on the roof? So this is the system here. Let's go into some more detail. And welcome to the KM6LYW radio roof. This is a 100 watt panel. 100 watts, which means, if you're at the equator, at the Earth's perigee, and there was no atmosphere, you get 100 watts. I don't know. I sometimes get like 80 watts out of it on a perfect day. The sun's pretty high. It's summer right now, so this is just kind of sitting on the roof. I don't know how to anchor that, but I got some neoprene pads under there, and it hasn't moved since I installed it. There's some 12 gauge wire, low voltage wire, that runs down through the weather head for the entrance of my utility, and of course there's a Diamond X200 sticking out on top of that. So this is a solar powered shack. If you were to look from a distance, that's definitely what it would be. So this is on the roof, and just below this is the shack. So a quick rundown on the technical specs. So it all starts with the solar panel, and that comes in right here at I think it's a 12 gauge DC line, and then it goes through an ammeter that I watch the DC amps. We're at under 2 amps, but that's mostly because the battery is almost full. And from there, the solar goes into a Genasun charge controller. I know this one isn't popular, but if you're a radio person, you should really look into it. One of the things they advertise is it is RF silent. It's not completely true, but man, it's so much better than the other ones. Make sure you put an RF choke on your solar input line. I think that's where most of the RF radiation comes from. And as we can see from a single solid light here, the battery is charged. If it's blinking fast, it's doing a low charge, usually topping off the battery, or if it's blinking slowly, it is doing a bulk charge. That's where we're going to see the amps kick up here to maybe between 5 and 6 amps with a 100 watt panel on the roof. So that Genasun charge controller goes into an ampere time 100 amp hour battery. This is my second battery. The first one was a complete SH you know what show. I'm not going to even say the manufacturer, but don't go with that one. The customer support was great, so I'm not going to say anything bad things about the battery. But the Ampere Time battery is better than the last one. Let's just put it that way. You're going to notice a lot of fuses along the way, so we're continuing our current path. The solar coming in to the charge controller, then coming out. There's another fuse here to protect this wire. So every wire needs to have a fuse on it. That's the proper amperage for that gauge of wire. There's lots of tables on the internet that are going to help you with that. So that actually goes into a fuse box. Right here, this is the positive side. And of course the charger feeds the battery, and this goes through a 60 amp fuse. You can find these on Amazon. They're totally cool, really easy to install with a hex wrench. And then there's some number 8 wire that finally goes to the battery post. So that's how the charging circuit works. Of course, the charge controller has a black wire going to the other side as well. Now this is for all of our DC loads. We're going to put one of these fuses in for every load here. And again, make sure you put a fuse that matches your gauge of wire. These are 14 gauge wires. I probably have the wrong fuse in there. I think there's a 20 in there right now. It should probably be a 15. And then I use these are called, you'll probably use power poles, but I use Dean's Ultra connectors. I don't know if you're into RC models ever. These are kind of a hassle to put on, but they probably have a better current rating and lower loss. So from here, I've got my VHF radio plugged in, and any other loads I can think of. I'm charging my phones off of this thing, anything that can use 12 volts. And there's, it's a lot more than just radios. There's another thing called, I'm not going to get the name of this right, but this is a cigarette lighter splitter, okay? I know it's not a clever name, but that's literally what it's called on Amazon. So you can have these 12-volt sockets here and turn them on and off with these buttons. The reason I got it was for this voltage meter. It's off by about 1/10 of a volt, but once you remember that, it's okay. And anything over 14 volts generally means you're charged. I put some USB chargers in these cigarette lighters. It also comes with a Qualcomm quick charge port, which I'm actually using to charge a Android tablet, and it does in fact come up to 9 volts, so it is quick charge. This USB cable is charging a DigiPi that we've got up here at the VHF desk. Of course, we've got a DigiPi right here doing DigiPi stuff, and it's connected, running a Yaesu FTM 400. No problem. That Yaesu is just no threat to this battery whatsoever. And of course, it's all fused and safe. So I think the emphasis of this little segment here is that we've got the right fuses. Now, one of the bigger reasons that I got this was to get the big item here that you guys are probably looking at, and that's the Renogy 2000 watt pure sine wave inverter. So the reason I got this and the 100 amp hour battery is because I want to be able to run my refrigerator for at least a day or two, if depending on how often you open the door. And I also want to be able to run the blower on my HVAC, or at least the heating portion of that, it'll run it for about 90 minutes if you do the math. I haven't done an actual current draw measurement, but I can definitely run the heater in the house for a while because we have propane, and I can run the refrigerator for a while. So in California, that's increasingly important as we just have massive energy dependence problems here, and we can't keep the lights on in California. But this will help us bridge the gaps, and I won't have to go start the gasoline generator, which is annoying and noisy. All I have to do is extend an extension cord from one of these outlets here, and I'm good to go. And I've already got a couple of fans hooked up here, just for fun. I've got a DC fan, and you'll notice those are computer fans, and I've also got an AC fan, just doing some testing here. And it's just been a lot of fun, really fascinating trip along the way. Yeah, I got a bad battery, I think, at first. Some of these cheaper batteries, the BMS just kicks in way too early if any one of the cells overvolts if they're out of balance. So that's really the thing you got to watch out for with the cheaper batteries, is the out of balance cells. You pay twice as much for a battery, you're guaranteed that's not going to be a problem, but that's something to be aware of. I don't remember how this goes on. Anyways, there's a cover for this. Make sure everything's covered. Safety first. You will see a fire, a spectacular fire with this much DC current on these. All right, so that is the rundown on a 100 amp hour battery with 2000 watt inverter and a fuse block for all of our DC loads that will get up to 14 point something volts at some point. So make sure your radios can handle that. I mean, most stuff is operating at 13.8 volts, and you'll see the Yaesu is indicating 14.2 volts in the upper right corner there, and so that's totally cool. All of this stuff is charging off of this battery, which means ultimately off of solar. I need a case for the DigiPi. Would somebody please print a case for that? I got it all stacked up there. All right, so that is the hardware setup. Let's move on. And just to cover some of these on Amazon, there's a couple of different lithium iron phosphate batteries that we have out there. And that's really what I would recommend at this point. It is a fantastic chemistry. So the cheaper ones will usually be made out of prismatic cells. These are the rectangular cells, and then the more expensive ones are usually a whole bunch of cylindrical cells. And now you're thinking, what's the difference? Who cares? As long as we got the same amount of amp hours in them. Well, there is a difference, and that's something that I really discovered. So if you're going to get the prismatic cells, that's these big rectangular dudes, and these are big. These fill one of those little battery cases. You'll find that there's 4 cells, and they're all in series. Now, the problem with these is, if one cell is out of balance and it charges too fast, the battery management system inside the battery will just suddenly disconnect the battery. We've got one cell that's it's met its max and we can't charge the battery anymore, and all the other cells haven't really been fully charged yet. The battery is out of balance. So you're thinking, okay, that's no big deal, right? But while your solar panel's dumping like 5 amps into the battery and that load suddenly disconnects, well, the voltage of your entire system suddenly spikes up because your solar panel's applying 18 to 20 volts to this battery. When it suddenly disconnects, well, suddenly all of your loads see 18, 20 volts. So you really need to get a balanced battery. I did have one earlier. It's a different brand. I'm not going to mention it, but it was a disaster in this regard. And I'd sit there and watch it, and the voltage would spike up every now and then, and there would be a battery error on the charger. And it's like, man, I don't want my radios attached to this battery, if it's going to suddenly shoot up to 18 volts. Now, mind you, it is kind of a static or capacitive charge. There's not a lot of current behind that voltage, but still, it was really alarming to see that happen. But anyways, I returned that battery. It was just so out of balance. The BMS would cut off at like 13.8 volts. And these are supposed to go up to 14.2 to 14.6 during their absorption phase. I got a different battery. The one we've got now, it cut off a little early. And some of the people on the forums are telling me, and this is really good advice, if these batteries are out of balance, and they usually are, the cheaper ones usually are, the expensive ones aren't, but they're twice the price. They're like $900 to get the cylindrical batteries that keep their balance because they're more in parallel, and there's a lot of them. But to really balance one of these, short of taking the battery completely apart and charging each cell individually, what they say is when the battery reaches 13.8 volts, assuming you've got a battery good enough that it'll reach that and won't disconnect itself for safety, get it to 13.8 volts and then hook it up to your radio power supply, which is also 13.8 volts, and let it sit there for days. Just hold that battery at 13.8 volts. And what you'll find is the battery management system, it does have tiny resistors to bleed off current in the high cells, and it'll do this over time, but these cells are so huge, it takes a long time to do that. So I did that like for a day and a half, and I was actually able to get the cutoff voltage a lot higher in this battery, definitely above 14.2 volts, which is what that Genasun generally wants. So balancing batteries in series is typically is hard to do. The only thing you can really do is just apply a constant voltage to the battery rather than a constant current, and let the battery management system do its job for a few days and balance those cells, and you'll get a higher overall voltage, and you won't see those huge voltage spikes in your system when the BMS battery management system just disconnects the battery all of a sudden from your circuit. All right, so we talked about those prismatic cells. They're cool, but if they're out of balance, they can be problematic. These are the cylindrical cells we talked about. Like if you're going to get an expensive Battleborn battery, it's full of these prismatic cells, and most of these are in parallel. If one cell is undervolting, its buddies will kind of help it out, and vice versa. So we don't see those balancing problems with these, but they cost twice as much. So the Ampere Time battery, we're looking at $400 on Amazon. It's not cheap. Lithium iron phosphate. This is considered to be cheap too. Don't get me wrong. The expensive one, like the Battleborn batteries, are almost $1,000. Before you buy a battery, go out to Will Pros. I don't know how to say his name. Sorry, Will. this dude has forgotten more about battery chemistries than I will ever know. So if you're looking at a battery, make sure Will has checked it out in advance for you. He'll do a tear down, see what's in it, see how they work. One thing I haven't really seen him talk about is the balancing issue, with these prismatic cells. And, can we get a battery up to 14.2 to 14.6 volts without it disconnecting on us? And as for the solar panel, it's a 100 watt new power, N-E-W-P-O-W-A, can't make that one up. Polycrystalline panel, there's monocrystalline as well. It's going to cost a little more, arguably more efficient, but the important thing here is this is an outside panel, so it's really tempered glass, and it'll survive a hailstorm more or less. And it's heavy enough, it's probably not going to blow away or take off on you. $80 for a solar panel, 100 watts. On a good day, you'll get 60, 65. On a really good day, you might push it to 80, and that's the solar panel. Additionally, if you want 110 volt stuff, 60 hertz, for at least in the Americas here, honestly, I don't know how you get a 220/50 inverter. Can you get those in Europe and elsewhere? This one's a little more expensive. In fact, this is a lot more expensive at $300. 2,000 watts is definitely going to run the 1/3 horsepower motor on my HVAC, so that was kind of the requirement there. And then it'll easily operate the refrigerator. I put some fans on it. I ran the fridge. I ran the HVAC. This one has a feature where the neutral and ground contacts are actually bonded. There's zero potential between the two. And the reason that's important is if you have anything like a flame sensor or a thermocouple in your heater, that's a requirement. The heater simply won't start if the neutral and ground lugs aren't bonded. That's an important feature. And it wasn't clear on this one if they were or not, but I tested it and they are, and the heater actually works great with this inverter. The charge controller, Jenison. I know there's a lot of cheap charge controllers out there. There's two kinds. There's a pulse width modulated one. You can get those for like $15. Yeah, they work, but they're inefficient. I would use this in the field, no problem. But like for my home system where I'm really trying to squeeze the most out of it, get a Jenison controller. Now, Craig, why aren't you getting one of the other MPPT controllers? No, the Jenison is specifically designed for amateur radio. If you look here, it's actually RF silent. So the Jenison, and you can get these. These aren't cheap. They are made in the United States of America, if that's important to you guys. And they're radio silent, not completely radio silent. If I wave an HT over it, I'll pick up some juice, some RF off like the solar leads. But put a choke on that, and it's actually pretty darn good. If you have a different one, turn on an AM radio, and see what happens when the charge controller is jamming. It is a RF festival. All right, you're going to need these fuses. This is a 60 amp fuse that I use for that fuse block. Get that one. It's about $11. You'll want the fuse panel for your DC loads. This is the breakout box or fuse panel for your DC loads. Make sure you match the fuse to your wire gauge. In fact, there's for each gauge has a different fuse type. So if you're using 14 gauge wire, 15 amps is basically the maximum that will handle. Yeah, maybe you can get away with a 20 amp fuse, but maybe a 15 amp fuse would be more appropriate. Let's get back where we were. This is the fuse block on Amazon. $17. That's a pretty good deal. And then we've got inline fuses. This is a simple automotive fuse. You can buy like a 4-pack of these, and actually these are the wire gauge is actually pretty good on these. I think these are 14 gauge, and I just use this for the solar charger itself for those leads. Make sure every wire you have is protected by a fuse, and a fuse properly sized for the gauge of the wire. Look that up. Definitely look that up. For the 12 volt distribution and the voltmeter, I have, what is this called? Cigarette lighter splitter, and it has USB outputs. It has cigarette lighter outputs that are all switchable. It also has a voltage reading. This is a pretty cool device. The Qualcomm stuff actually works. The quick charge thing actually works. And then for wire, officially, legally by code, if you're going to do wire in wall, you're going to want to use THHN or THWN. This is stranded wire. It's direct burial grade. It has a PE jacket. It can survive sun. This is the wire that won't fail you. It is really expensive. I don't know of a lot of alternatives, that are up to code. I bought some 8 gauge versions of this at the hardware store. And it wasn't expensive. I just bought some short leads just to support those 60 amp legs on that battery. But THHN or THWN, I think the W means it's weatherproof, but it's all basically the same stuff. And it'll say THHN on the side of the wire. So that wire is expensive, but you gotta use, if you want to do this by code, you're gonna want to use that wire. And again, going back to the amperage ratings, this is how you're gonna size your fuses. I've got what number 6 wire I think I had in there, and I have a 60 amp breaker or circuit fuse on there, so that's pretty close. Make sure all of your wires have a little weak spot in them called a fuse, and use them, install them. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me on the solar stuff. This has been a lot of fun. This has been really educational for me. And hopefully it was educational for you guys. And when I say you guys, I particularly mean the patrons of the channel. You guys are just killing it here. Honestly, patreon.com/KM6LYW radio. You can support the channel. This will also get you access to the DigiPi software image. This is a Raspberry Pi with a little screen on it. You can hook it up to your radio, and it gives you access to every data mode there is. This is a digital transceiver for your amateur radio. The DigiPi project at Krager.org/DigiPi. I think you can just Google it now. What happened? I don't know. Let's see what happens if we Google it. Let's Google DigiPi. See if it comes up. This is like Googling yourself. It's kind of cringy. Actually, it went to DigiPi.com. It tried anyway. I have a bunch of DigiPis, and their host names are actually DigiPi here. So let's actually use Google. And yeah, the first hit is the KM6LYW Radio DigiPi project. So again, patrons of the channel get access to this SD card image. And again, it gives you access to every data mode there is, APRS, Digipacket, all of the HF modes, JSA, call, FT8, and they're all accessible via your phone or your tablet. You don't need to be a Linux dude to use this. It becomes a hotspot. You just hold your phone up to it and start your operating data modes when it's connected to your radio. The DigiPi project at Krager.org/DigiPi. All right, Foo, thank you, buddy. Thank you, Foo. You're still number 1 on the list here, and I think you guys are supporting me the longest. I really appreciate it. Steve, thank you very much. Michael Lalk, thank you. Brian, thank you for hanging out at all our premieres. I know you show up there when we release these videos. I really appreciate the support, Brian. Jake, excellent. Christopher, Tony, NW2W, Mark, Ryan, William. I think you commented on a video. William or Bill? Well, I guess we'll go either way. Ian, Jim, Brad, Douglas, Simon, Don. Thank you. Let me know how the Appalachian Trail Golden Packet stuff is going, Don. Kevin, Barry, Mark. Thank you, Robert, Kevin, Harold, Ken, Claude, Carlton. Thank you, Carlton. Eddie, Aaron, Jeff. There's just so many here, guys. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. You are really motivating me to keep these amateur radio videos up. You guys are more passionate about amateur radio than I am. That's what's so invigorating about this, is to talk to you guys online in our Discord channel, in our mailing list for the DigiPi. You guys really have some great ideas, and I appreciate it. Martin, Louis, Peter, Andrew, Larry. Thank you, guys. Richard, Terry. I need a scroller or something. I don't know how to get all of your names on the screen here. Hey, kiddo, thank you. Michael, Stephen, Brian, Jedi Master, Eon, thank you. Alexis, thank you. All the way down to Chris Hurd, Robin, Steve, Red Fang. Thank you, Red. Appreciate it. All right, guys. This has been another KM6LYW radio production. My name is Craig. I'm in California, and I am clear.